Welcome to the Region Free Gamers podcast. My name's Paul, and today we're charging up our Mega Busters. Welcome to the Region Free Gamers podcast, the podcast that's fluent in gaming. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that is very near and dear to our hearts, the little blue hero Mega Man. But before we get into that topic, first I want to thank everyone for listening, and if you enjoy what you hear, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. And what do the kids say now? They say smash that subscribe button. Is that it?
Like and subscribe if you like what you see.
Or maybe you don't really like it unless you're violent towards the subscribe button. So.
Exactly.
You can't gently subscribe. You gotta smash it.
Yeah. And before we move on to the topic, of course, my co-hosts to the far east of me, out of New York City, Ozzy.
It's Brooklyn, man, guys. How are you?
Isn't Brooklyn like New York?
Yep. Yeah, but I am Brooklyn man in terms of the Mega Man Boss Masters. So.
Oh, I see. You're Brooklyn. Hey, man, let me tell you, Brooklyn man would have been a lot better than some of the ones that we've seen.
Yeah, I think so.
And then to the east of me also, Arnaldo out of Virginia.
Yo, I'm back after being absorbed into my mind.
Oh, man.
I know, right? And south of me, special guest host today, Brandon out of California. How you doing, man?
Good morning. Doing well here.
Before we move on to Mega Man, which is like the third time I've said that now, Brandon is a buddy of ours that we've been chatting on Instagram with for a little while now, and a big fan of video games. Brandon takes pretty much the best game pictures I've seen on the internet. Are we in agreement on this?
Yeah, unanimously.
Yeah, I don't expect Brandon to agree with that, but
yeah, I don't know. I'm obsessive, so I'm not sure if I want to give myself that amount of credit. So
yeah, he also has one of the best usernames.
Oh yeah. If you want to check out Brandon's work at Super Sparkster, he has it's actually, the pictures are fantastic. But when I first started following his account, it was actually his captions. I was like, this guy's hilarious. He can do it all in one sentence.
That's half the battle usually driving into work, man. Like, how do I make yet another joke on Mario 3? You know, it's like...
And, hey man, when did you first start gaming anyway?
I started gaming very, very young. I think I was one of the only kids in my elementary school with the 32X Sega CD Genesis monstrosity.
Nice.
So a very long time ago. My brother and I were really into games when we were young. Kind of took a hiatus from it when I was a bit older in high school and college. I got into like music and film, and but it's come full circle here. So yeah, 30 years now probably is the good answer.
Yeah, I think that's the story with a lot of people around our age in like early to mid 30s, or Arnaldo's like late 20s, but whatever, same thing. Is that we all start out as kids doing it and then kind of move away from it, and then eventually, like in Godfather 3, we all get pulled back in.
Right.
And
then we murder our confidants.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Yeah, we take our analogies very seriously.
Yes, we are committed.
So anyhow, we're gonna actually, it's not just Mega Man we're talking about. We're talking about just the first 6 titles in the NES. For us to talk about, every Mega Man game would be bonkers. It would be almost like we talked about every controller that's ever made, right? So yeah, just the first 6. And I guess the best place to start is just by asking the question, what is Mega Man? I'm sure the vast majority of our listeners will know exactly who he is. But just to kind of set the table here, Mega Man is a run and gun / platformer, kind of I don't know, kind of like a hybrid. Would you guys say that? You know, where you have kind of a little bit of a Contra feel, but also a Mario feel?
Yeah, I'd say so.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit, when you talk run and gun, you kind of think Contra. But compared to Mega Man, it has, as you say, that Mario feel where it's a little bit more slower paced, and you have less of like the just shooting emphasis. It's more of a puzzle where you have to figure out how to get through a particular area with platforming. So I don't think the emphasis on something like Contrast on platforming. It's just pure run and gun action, and it's just making sure that you aim and you shoot and you react quickly. Mega Man kind of blends that with the twitchy, shooting mechanics, but also it's about the platforming. So you may have to be jumping on like to avoid spikes on platforms that disappear or whatever the case may be. And each kind of stage or scene, it's a puzzle unto itself. So if I had to compare it to a Mario, I would say Donkey Kong 1994. Did you guys ever play that on the Game Boy? It's more like that, where you have to get to a particular platform. You go from A to B, and you have enemies that are kind of swooping in on you as you go. So it's more of an emphasis on slower paced platforming, but also running and gunning. So it makes it so that it's constantly exciting and thrilling, but also it does feel like you have to emphasize precision and making sure you time your moves well.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, the platforming element is a lot more based on timing and puzzles and figuring out the best way to go about it. Where something like Contra, the only platforming puzzle is being on the waterfall level and making sure you don't kill your friend who's lagging behind.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's definitely a lot more thought put into that component of the game.
Yeah, and compare. I mean, one of the things about Contra is that, just taking a step back, Mega Man was developed by Capcom, and we all know and love Capcom. But at the time, Capcom was not really a huge player, and we're talking about the mid 1980s. But Capcom, like other companies, they were also developing arcade games. I mean, that's really where they cut their teeth. And Contra is very much an arcade game. I mean, you could apply it to the arcades, and it feels just as good as it feels on the consoles, because it's fast. You get through 6 levels, and that's it. You're done. Whereas Mega Man, I think Mega Man really marked the inflection point between the move away from the arcade-like sensibilities towards a slower-paced console-like game. I think it was Mario Brothers, and then Mega Man was the natural progression for action games in terms of moving into a console more oriented mentality, where you could choose the various bosses, you could choose your play style, and I think it's because of that it's a more slower paced game compared to Contra.
Yeah, I think unlike a lot of, and it's funny, I was about to call it a hybrid, but it wasn't even, you can't even really call it a hybrid as we know them today, where you take two genres and kind of mash them up. Mega Man, it just at this point just kind of feels like its own thing even. Yeah. And I think it just kind of executes it perfectly.
Yeah,
I don't know how many games I've referred to, and I'm trying to explain them. I'm like, well, it's like Mega Man. It's become such a standard by at this point in time. Where
it was very much the Dark Souls of its time. Just to get that out of the way real early.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
just to already throw that out there. No, in the sense that it built on play mechanics that may have come before, but it very much did it in its own idiosyncratic way. So, for example, like Dark Souls did action, hack and slash, and the like, but it also did it in a very methodical, animation-oriented way. Whereas Mega Man did the same thing for run and gun games in its own very particular style. And I'm kind of thinking about other games of the time. They were all kind of trying to figure out what exactly would translate to the console. So Bionic Commando, for example, would use the grappling mechanics and the like. Ninja Gaiden. I guess Ninja Gaiden is similar to Mega Man in a way, but it's more slashing oriented because you have the blade and you have less of an emphasis. You don't have an emphasis on shooting really. Yeah. But all of them were just kind of trying to figure out what worked in a console environment.
Well, it's pretty interesting in that regard, because I think I mean, obviously, you know, it reminds me almost like of the 32-bit era too, where people are just kind of throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Seeing what works.
It would seem, you know, to make sense that you would have a character that shoots, you know, lasers out of his arm. Sooner or later, someone would have would have come up with that. And actually, no, Metroid had already released by then. So you could technically say that Metroid did Mega Man before Mega Man in a way.
There was an anime called, and there's a Sega CD game of this anime, and the Sega CD game is worth a mint. Space Adventure Cobra.
Yeah, I have that one sitting here. Actually.
I thought you did. I thought I saw a picture of that one. It made me.
I convinced my dad to buy me that one when I was like 11. We were in we were in a Walmart, and I saw like a chick on the front with like a gun and a bikini doing a ninja kick. I'm like, this game must have everything I could ever want.
That's all you needed.
Yeah.
So, and it was like $5 or something. I was like, let's sneak it into the cart, see if they notice, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ended up with that one.
Nice. Well, that character Cobra, that's from the late 70s. And he's got the laser gun arm looking very, very similar to Mega Man's. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's not the only influence Mega Man kind of got the design from. I think the main influence there was Astro Boy, and then the different bosses and power-ups. As we saw in that interview that we read about with Akira Kitamura, some influences there from Ninja Captor. And I see your notes here, Ozzy, with a Super Sentai team with different powers. Sound familiar?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Actually, in the interview, Kitamura, who is kind of together with Keiji Inafune, they're kind of the fathers of Mega Man, even though Keiji Inafune is really the one that has gotten most of the recognition nowadays. But they actually, if you see Mega Man's helmet, there's kind of like a platform on the center, or when you acquired new power-ups, the helmet was supposed to change and represent kind of like the element or like the thing. So if like it was like a gear, or it could be like water, or it could be like a lightning type thing, and they decided that they couldn't do it, and the implication was that it would have been too clear of a copyright infringement if they did that. So they decided to go against it. But as you said, Paul, I really think Osamu Tezuka's Astro Boy is really a big influence. I mean, the idea of a little boy robot being created by the scientist that fights against evil. It's very much Astro Boy in every sense, and you know, to say that Astro Boy is an influence is it's clear that everyone in Japan, almost every animation was influenced by Astro Boy in some way. But Mega Man, more than most, it seemed very much like a direct, translation of Astro Boy.
I was gonna say, what's the first Mega Man game that you played, Brandon?
I would say 2 or 3. It's hard to remember, but I know my brother and I rented from a mom and pop video store either 2 or 3, and I got into them from there.
How was that? Like playing it for the first time?
It was great, and my brother and I, we had really similar gaming tastes. We'll still do today, but we I know we fought a lot when we were younger, but playing Mega Man, it was like we suddenly wanted to solve these puzzles at the same time together, figure out what weapons worked with who. It was a great experience. Memorable at that. So,
did you guys fight over who got to play?
We were actually pretty good on the, okay, you die, give me the controller, unless the death was immediate, then we had to determine how immediate. But
you had to throw a flag on the play, had to go back to the review booth.
Yeah.
No, that was too short.
It's like with
short.
pinball, when you get the free play and the ball goes down too quick, it's like, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, and Paul, just to take a step back, just to kind of, for the listeners, for those 3 of you that have not played Mega Man, Mega Man has a rock, paper, scissors type like gameplay where you beat a boss. You can choose from 8 different bosses, 6 in the first one, and after you beat them, you acquire their power, and that power is strong against another enemy. So part of the appeal of Mega Man is trying to figure out which weapons work best against other boss masters, robot masters, which is what they're called. So that's really for being a game set in, that was released in the 80s. There wasn't the internet or anything like that, so there was a lot of element of trying to figure out and talking in the schoolyard about who had to work on what. I mean, who, which power-ups worked on whom, and it's part of what made it a little bit difficult, because you kind of had to get through the whole level, and then once you got through the whole level, okay, well, let me see if this power-up works on this particular boss, and maybe it didn't, and then you had to go and try again.
Yeah, so, and it's funny you mentioned the schoolyard, because like when I was replaying them, we've all been playing them, I think, except Arnie. Arnie took the easy route and and watched long plays.
Yeah.
But most of us have been replaying these games over the past couple weeks, and I kind of struggled with the later entries that I didn't play, because I didn't know what order to do everything in, right? And I didn't know which weapons each robot master was weak to. And so I'm trying to remember when I was a kid, I'm like, did I just know because we all talked about video games all the friggin' time? Or did I have to discover it myself? Because the discovering myself is a giant pain in the ass, right? Like, it's so hard not to just Google it.
Well, and one of the difficult parts about it is that you have usually 3 continues, so you get 3 tries at a level. If you get to the end boss, there's this kind of pre-boss area, and that's where you usually start. The problem is that you have energy for the power-up, so if you try to use the power-up on the boss and you die, then the loss of energy carries over to the continue. So it's very possible that you may have 2 continues, but you have no energy left.
Right.
So if that's the case, then you better try to figure out how to, defeat the boss with the Mega Buster.
Yeah, I found over time I've started to go into bosses if I had another life available, and I would just go in and get killed and not not use up any of my energy for the thing that was going to work on the boss. So.
Because it's kind of like the environment has to be perfect. You need to have a good amount of energy. You need to have a good amount of power-up energy. And you kind of need to be in the zone before you go into a boss, because you're going to have to read all the different telegraph moves and the like, and have to have the quick reaction time. And, I feel like Mega Man, it's made for like speedrunners. I mean, speedrunners have a go at it, and it's a lovely game because it's a game that rewards fast reactions and making sure that you recognize patterns and the like. But for someone like me that's, not great hand-eye coordination, it's still good because you get to try it over and over again. And you may not, do a run without a hit, but, even if you end with just one sliver of energy, it does feel good to be able to start reading the bosses and start reading the patterns and kind of having that run where after trying it 10 times, you finally get it. And it's just with like one sliver of health, and then the boss just disintegrates and you're like, oh, finally.
Yeah.
It's a very rewarding feeling. And I think games like Dark Souls, again, try to tap into that, where it's like when they talk about NES hard, I think they're very much referring to games like Mega Man, where it's extremely hard, but also very rewarding when you actually manage to finally get that perfect run. And I mean perfect in the sense that you just managed to beat it, not in the sense of 0 hits.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mega Man is definitely like the quintessential NES game like that, right? It's a game that, if you know what you're doing, probably takes you no more than 40 minutes to beat or 30 minutes to beat. But the way that it's structured, you have to sort of figure that out. And back in the day when you had to do this, you didn't have as many resources as you do now. And so most of the fun in Mega Man comes from playing these stages over and over again, getting to these bosses, trying to figure out what they're weak against, what their patterns are, how to avoid all that. And at the end of the day, just having that knowledge to then when you go replay it, you're just fucking killing it. And you feel so empowered. And that's what makes Mega Man like such a beautiful game to watch. Somebody who's good at Mega Man is so entertaining because you just see them go through all these things, and it sort of makes the puzzle of the level come together for you when you're seeing like how they get through each specific area, how they tackle each specific problem. And it also shows you that there are several ways to do it. Once you're powered up, once you have different powers, you can tackle situations in multiple ways.
Yeah,
So
it surprised me. So I think I underuse a lot of the power-ups during the regular levels, which whenever I've watched a speedrun of Mega Man, people are constantly switching what power they're using during the regular level. And that's something I definitely underutilize. I just hold all of those powers till the end where I'm at, a main boss or a robot master. And watching, it's definitely like watching more akin to somebody's speed running or solving a Rubik's Cube. It's got that kind of impressive quality to it. Unless they're jumping over the one-ups to be cocky, then that's annoying.
Oh man, every time I saw someone do that, I'm like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, I know. That
was
nuts.
the first long play I saw. Was this guy didn't get any E-tanks, no one-ups that weren't directly in front of him. And it was... I can't tell what I hate more, whether it's the guy who does the entire game and like barely ever gets hit and just destroys everything, or if it's the guy who gets hit all the time during the regular level because he's just trying to go, but then still kills the boss like immediately, like super easy with like less than half life starting off, and I'm like, I hate you because I can't do that. Like,
I think I hate the second, or sorry, I hate the first guy more.
The first guy, the untouchable.
Yeah. The second guy, he's like the rugged superhero who takes some hits. He's the Batman, and the first guy is Superman. Nobody can identify with Superman.
I like that we're categorizing speedrunners here in the superhero universe.
What happens to me, Brandon, is that I get the power-ups, and maybe I'm like fully stocked and I have all the power-ups, and then I don't use them at all because I'm like, what if I need to use them later for this boss that I can only use that power-up, and I don't have like max energy. Right. So I don't end up, as you said, using any of them in the stage. Like I just, it becomes like just me and my trusty Mega Buster, and then whenever I get to a boss, I have like all the power-ups up to max.
Yeah.
But I haven't used any of them, and it would probably make the game a whole lot easier. Like if I could just use those power-ups and knew how to handle like my energies better.
Yeah, I know for sure. And I've always, whenever I do use them during the regular gameplay, it's always begrudgingly so. Like I'm in a situation where I'm like, oh my god, I've got to use 2 little marks of my fire or ice shot or whatever it is.
Exactly. Or if you're in Mega Man 2, you use the disc blades. That's kind of like
totally.
The cheating mode.
Yeah, I mean, being able to shoot in 8 directions with a weapon is great. So
it's amazing. Paul, I mean, maybe we should just take a quick step and just kind of like talk about what the story of Mega Man is. It's very simple, but maybe we can just discuss that.
Sure. I mean, you're right. It is very simple. We'll start with Mega Man 1 then. Actually, you know what, Ozzy, before we do that, just as far as the series as a whole, the music maybe, you can see in the first game, the music is, I wouldn't say it's miles better than what else was available on the NES at the time, but it's definitely a cut above. And they really made a focus of it in subsequent games to the point where the music is just, as a whole, just beloved. Later games perhaps don't quite have the same catchiness, but that's obviously subjective, right?
Yeah. No, but I do think that the music was, in a sense, peppier and a lot more fast paced than you were necessarily used to. I think there's a reason why Mega Man has kind of become the de facto influence for chiptune music. Because it's very much a lot of bleeps and bloops, but they're very melodic. They're very catchy. It's just memorable kind of jingles. Like right now, I'm just kind of talking about this and thinking about Cutman Stage, and it's just very kind of just, it makes you really feel like you're going on this adventure and running, gunning, shooting, jumping. And so, yeah, I do think that music is a big part of it. And I think the fact that you have these different bosses each one of them have kind of a character to them and have like a personality to them. And the music is supposed to kind of coincide with that. So from what I read in the interviews with Kitamura was that Elecman's stage was supposed to be a little bit more staticky and electric and the like. So they try to imbue each level and each character with some sort of personality, and that translated to the music as well.
And they largely succeed with that. I can tell you that, to be honest with you, I didn't really pay too much attention to how the music matched the level in most of the games, but in part 2, it definitely does to a shocking extent just how perfect the music is for each level. That's just in my opinion anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. And I do think it is matched well, but it's not done in this, like, really, overpowering way or something to where it's heavy-handed. It's not so much, when you play Mario 1 and you're in a water level and suddenly the music sounds like a lullaby. It's not to that degree, but the music is fitting. And backing up to the beginning, the Mega Man series in terms of music, I did think it made some serious strides in that it was the first game that I played, and that I don't recall getting like the music stuck in my head out of an irritation quality. Like, it wasn't the jingle from a local carpet commercial. It was like, I was playing the game and I didn't mind. And Mega Man's a game where you're going to hear the music over and over and over and over. When you get to those levels you can't pass. But I never recall once feeling like irritated with the sounds I was hearing.
I mean, there were maybe some sound effects that were irritating.
Well, right. Yes, that's a whole other matter.
But not necessarily the music.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those where my sort of standard for especially early game music like this is, does it stand up on its own? Like, outside of the context of the game, how good is this music? And Mega Man is one of the first, I think, or at least one of the best, where these songs are not, just video game music. Like, these are just good songs, good compositions that you could play pretty much anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and it's evidenced by the fact that some of these games have been released on vinyl, the game soundtracks, and they actually translate quite well. I mean, of course, you need to have a certain affinity towards this type of music. It's not like if you're listening to, I don't know, Beethoven, and, you go from that to Mega Man, and you're an old fart. You're going to say, what the hell is this? But for us, that we grew up with this and, we identify with it and have a little bit of a broader mind about what music can be, I think it's very good quality music. And it's very impressive that this was able to be achieved on a very limited amount of memory that the NES had. So it's kind of a little bit weird. And when we talk about the games, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but Mega Man 1, the music is great, and 2 and 3 also have perhaps the best music in the whole series. 4, 5, 6, it just kind of loses the trail a little bit, and it becomes a little bit more, it just kind of fades into the background. There's nothing that's as memorable as some of the stages, like Snake Man stage or something like that. So it's it's kind of a product of changing teams and different folks going into it and kind of putting their own spin on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and let me just mention before we go into it, Paul, I mean, these are games that for a long time I kind of admire from afar, because I always felt like they were just too hard for me, and particularly with the NES, I really didn't have much of a possibility to get through it because they were just so brutally hard. But now that they've recently been released on PS4 and PS3 and the like, and they've been released with save states, it's kind of opened up this world for me because I can all of a sudden beat it again. Before this, I really didn't have any kind of opportunity to be able to put in the time and have the dedication to get through the games. But now with save states, it's kind of like, okay, well, I can finally see this game through to completion. And it's very, fun to actually be able to do so and participate in the conversation, because it was just locked out for me before.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Some of us aren't as weak, and we try to go through the whole game without save states, but for others, that's a nice little thing.
I have to admit, look, I mean, it's not like, Mega Man 9 where they had an easy mode where they just, or Mega Man 10, yeah, where they had the easy mode and they basically like put a platform on top of the spikes. Like that's just, like why are you even playing? It's like that's for the Call of Duty crowd. Just press forward to win. So it's I mean, it could be worse. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I think even with the save states, I mean, you're still, like the levels we've talked about, outside of this conversation that are, the spikes on the top and bottom, and it's just awful platforming. Part of the fatigue that comes in those sections of the game, of any Mega Man game, is getting back to that point. Even if you're at a checkpoint, it's generally not at the point that's super hard. So the frustration is you get killed at this thing that you've been getting killed at for 30 minutes, and then you still have to fight through, 4 or 5 little scenes just to even get there. I mean, that does create, I think, a lot of fatigue for some people.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, building on that, it's a situation where this is what happened to me a lot of times in Mega Man, and why I have never been able to beat one is you sort of get to this point that's a difficult thing, and then you eventually get over it. But then you find the second difficult thing, and then you die, and then, like Brandon said, you get sent back. So now, not only do I have to figure out how to get over that second difficult thing, but I have to redo the first difficult thing that killed me I don't know how many times before.
Right.
And it's just sort of a cascading effect until I sort of try to end my life by choking myself with a controller cord.
Yeah, it's a really hopeless feeling. Like, how am I going to be able to string together the set of Halley's Comet victories,
Yeah. Well, I do feel though that playing these games over this week in preparation for this episode, the save states really helped in that sense, because I was able to just focus on that one particular scene and just get through it and save it and then just go to the next one. I don't know if I would have been able to have the same amount of patience if I had to have gone back.
Yeah.
I would have probably. I mean, if I was a kid and this is the only game that I had, I would have totally done it. And it would have just been a matter of kind of getting back to that point. But for example, like just in a modern context, Bloodborne, I love that game, but I died so many times at one point, and I had to get back to that point so many times that I just kind of put it down and did not touch it again for like a year. Yeah. That's, I think, what would have happened to me in Mega Man if I didn't have those save states.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we're just old, right? The patience isn't quite there anymore.
Or the time, which is really what becomes an issue.
That's the key thing.
If you really had the time, I think you could spend hours upon hours trying to perfect that. And another thing that I noticed over playing this week was that these are games that are kind of, they lend themselves to be cheesed in a way that you have to find kind of like the exploits in the mechanics of it and in the particular levels, and just kind of try to get through whatever way you can. So it's kind of like cheese or die. So it's kind of trying to figure out, for example, in Mega Man 1, where if you pause, then you have extra, you have extra hits to the bosses, when you shoot. I may or may not have used that a lot last night in beating Mega Man 1. So. You may have. So you do have to figure out what the glitches are, what is not particularly well designed, and might help you get through it. And that can work both ways, because there are some elements that are not well designed and they can actually kill you in a cheap way. Mm-hmm. So there are games that, at least the first two, they're a little bit rough around the edges, and they have a lot of glitches here and there and things that you just kind of have to figure out, because there are these quirks that could kill you without you realizing it.
Yeah. But to that same note, there are actual things built into the game to where you can suddenly have this epiphany where you utilize one of the weapons, one of the platform type upgrades, to get past something that you've been trying to get past for a very long time. I mean, the example that comes to my mind is the Heatman stage with the disappearing and reappearing blocks. If you've got, I think, the weapon 2 power up, whatever one is with a rocket that you can just ride on. I remember being a kid and actually figuring that out and being like, oh my god, I can just fly past all this shit? Like, what have I been doing? It's
awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that you mentioned, Brandon, that now has just kind of come to my mind is that one of the issues with this game is that the memory limitation was so heavy, and they try to cram so much stuff into it that the slowdown is massive, to the point that the slowdown becomes a feature of the game itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, that when it actually slows down, that actually allows you to be able to navigate and traverse through the different lasers that are coming at you and the different enemies. So you kind of have to go from, you know, normal motion to slow motion. And you know, then it goes back again. And so it's a constant mix of the two. So I have seen very few games where a problem with the game, such as slowdown, is actually so intertwined with it. And you actually have to rely on it.
Yeah. But circling back to the first game, Paul, that I know we're going to be talking about in a second, I will just throw this disclaimer out here for everybody listening, is that as we've discussed before, my mom committed the unforgivable sin of birthing me well past the release of most of these Mega Man games. So I have no childhood experience with Mega Man. But obviously later on I was able to experience it through re-releases and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Paul, what was your experience with Mega Man? Because I don't think we've discussed that.
Yeah, no, the first one was Mega Man 2. I played it at a friend's house, and I just, like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Couldn't believe it. Because we had the password for Dr. Wily, right? And so you enter the password, and then you see this gigantic skull castle. Graphically, like, there was nothing else like it that I had ever seen. And then at the end of that first level, which, by the way, the music, but we'll get to that later. And then at the end of that first level, you have the Mecha Dragon. And I'm like, this is unreal. Unreal.
Yeah.
That was just visually, right?
Yeah. To have a boss that large, just in scale, is incredible to see. So.
Oh, I couldn't believe it. And so I eventually borrowed it and just absolutely played the crap out of it.
And you're like, I still have it today.
How it goes.
Yeah, exactly. How many times has that happened?
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean, and Paul, to your point, the interview with Kitamura, he said that he didn't just want to have, like, you know, a few enemies like Mega Man with his pew pew shooter kind of shooting like enemies his size. You know, they really were trying to stand out from other games, and so the only way to really do this was to create big ass bosses. And so, like, something like the Mecha Dragon or like the snakes in Mega Man 3 and the like, you know, they're kind of ingrained and emblazed onto the mentality of kids, because it really did feel like, you know, at the 80s maybe, you know, you did feel like this was a cartoon, like this was just a real cartoon, and it's like, how are games going to get any better than this? And it really used, you know, its animation influence very well, and in order to be able to do that, it's pretty well known that they had to use the background layer. So the Mecha Dragon, for example, was actually part of the background. That's the reason why the stages go dark. Yeah. Because it's actually the background, and it's kind of moving through the background. It's not in the foreground as Mega Man is. So this really, like, opened up a universe of possibilities for them where they could create these massive bosses, and just, that was very impressive for the time.
Very clever trick.
If you think about the, you know, the other games of the time, I don't think there was a boss, like a screen-filling boss like that. At least none that come to mind pre 1988, 1987.
Yeah, and a happy accident of knocking out that background layer, I think, really helps set the tone for some of those levels, too.
Yes.
Like, everything's dark, I'm going to get to some scary stuff right now. I mean, it's kind of... yeah.
Yeah, it does feel like lights out, get ready, because you're going to be in for a gauntlet.
Yeah.
So, and the funny part is that a lot of these big bosses are like the mid-bosses. So they're not even the real bosses. So it's like, okay, well, this is just a test for you to get to the final boss.
Yeah.
And
I mean, especially when you, I can't imagine what that feeling is like when you've been playing through this entire game. It's already hard as hell, and you've been fighting, you know, bosses that are comparable in size to yourself for the most part, and then this screen-filling, like, gigantic sprite shows up, which is probably... it's got to be one of the best sprites on the NES, like, in terms of just recognizability and if like the shock that it produces when you first see it, because you've never seen anything like that up to this point in this game or anywhere else.
Yeah,
Well,
I remember the
that's the
first
thing,
time
I
I saw
mean-
the dragon, like, I just jumped off the platforms out of fear. and it's so sneaky of them to throw that dragon in a part of the game where you're having to constantly jump from platform to platform. And
Yeah. I mean, and I think in the US, they did it very well because they actually put like pictures, screenshots of the Mega Dragon. And if you're a kid and you see that and you're like, oh God, I gotta get this game right now.
Yeah.
Never mind that the cover art is god awful. I mean,
Right.
I'm absolutely buying this thing. And I think really your experience, Paul, is many kids' experience, which is that they started with Mega Man 2 rather than Mega Man 1. I think people like maybe a few played Mega Man 1, but most people played Mega Man 2 and then they went back to Mega Man 1 and said, okay, let me see how this one is.
Yes.
But I think Mega Man 2 was really the one that blew everything up, and I have to think that those big ass bosses were part of the reason why.
100%. There's no doubt about it. It was so impressive visually, and again, when combined with all the other elements of the game, I mean, that's why we're doing a podcast on it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on that note, we should probably take a break. And
Yeah.
when we come back, we'll get into the story of Mega Man 1 and talk about the rest of the series.
Great.
Okay, and we're back, and we're gonna dive right into the very first notoriously hard Mega Man. The first Mega Man, the OG, released December 1987, Japan and North America, which was a little bit weird for the time. Usually the Japanese games came out, anywhere from 3 months to a year ahead of time, but somehow Mega Man got released simultaneously with the Japanese version. And produced by Akira Kitamura and, of course, the legend Keiji Inafune. They are, like Ozzy said earlier, considered the fathers of Mega Man, with Kitamura being the brain behind most of the actual creation, even though he's not as well known as Inafune. The music, as we mentioned earlier, Manami Matsume, she went on to UN Squadron and Magic Sword, and then later, as a freelancer, contributed to Mega Man 10, Shovel Knight, and Mighty Number 9. And just as an aside, I haven't played Mighty Number 9. I've heard so many not good things about it. Like, Brandon, have you played it?
no, I have not played Mighty Number 9.
So is it just
Like-
Ozzy out of the four of us?
No, it's kind of hard to stand up for Mighty Number 9 or get excited about it.
Yeah.
Considering, I mean, I'm not gonna get into a Mighty Number 9 digression, but but the art style is so bland that I just can't find myself to get excited, which is a shame because the original kind of concept art was so cool.
Yeah, I remember there was a ton of hype about it prior to its release.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms right there.
Yeah.
But Paul, I just want to take a step back in terms of Akira Kitamura and Keiji Inafune. The problem was, I think, that Kitamura left after the second game. He left Capcom, and so I don't think he's as well known as Keiji Inafune because of that. And Keiji Inafune kind of took over the stewardship of Mega Man itself, and he was just kind of like the Mega Man guy at Capcom.
Yeah.
It became his baby in a way. I mean, even though Kitamura was the one that created the original character sprite, and then Inafune turned that into the art that we know, it was really Keiji Inafune that really kind of became emblematic of Mega Man. And he then went on to create Mega Man X, Mega Man Legends, and all the various spin-offs of Mega Man. So it's hard not to separate. It's hard to separate Mega Man from Keiji Inafune. Yeah, and I do believe. I mean, I maybe Magni number 9 has influenced a lot of this, but Inafune kind of bugs me a little bit because he's a hype man. He's very good at marketing himself, I think, and the reality is, as Kitamura said, the original Mega Man was really a product of an entire team, of 7 that they just kind of all chimed in. Whereas Keiji Inafune has just kind of like appropriated the entire series, and it's really a disservice to all the people that have worked on it over time. And I think Inafune rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and I think that's kind of come through in the last few years. But I mean, credit where credit's due. I mean, he did steward Mega Man through all the Capcom years, and even though there were probably many more Mega Man games than they probably should have released, it still made it a game series that was very much part of the gamer consciousness throughout its existence, even though right now it's kind of dormant.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have so much of a problem with them myself. I understand what you're saying about the self-promotion, but I don't know, as a general rule, I don't really have an issue with talented people kind of putting themselves out there and saying, hey, this is my name, hire me.
yeah. I mean, the Shigeru Miyamoto's of this world and the Keiji Inafunes and the like. Yeah. But no, I mean, I think he's talented. I mean, I do wish that he would shut up once in a while, but
yeah.
But he is talented, and he did. He was indispensable for the Mega Man franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. And most of that team, as with most of the video game production in the 80s, very young, straight out of college for the most part, and you can see it. I mean, we talked about it earlier, right? The game is, I wouldn't call it quite experimental, but it's definitely a little bit rough around the edges.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you can see that a lot of what works here gets really sanded up and really polished for the games that come afterward.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
And the comment was made earlier, it's definitely the mentality of like throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And I mean, luckily for us as the consumers, a lot of stuff stuck to the wall. A lot of it worked great.
Absolutely.
Well, it's interesting as well that the Mega Man 1 is so hard, and I think I attribute that more to what Paul said, which was that it was rough around the edges, and maybe there was a little bit less playtesting than they probably would have wanted. I should mention that this game was not really very high on Capcom's list. It was just kind of like this new team just kind of started working on it, and Capcom was not really paying attention to it. And Kitamura says that it was Manami Matsumae's music that really made them take notice of the game. But still, the game was not really very highly regarded at Capcom. But it's funny because Kitamura says that when he created the game, he kind of went back to like all these hard games of the NES, and he tried to figure out why they were hard and why people were frustrated. So he like literally locked himself, in a room and just started playing through all these hard games, and he realized that there were choke points, that there was enemy behavior and placement that was not properly done, and so it made it feel very unfair and cheap. And so he tried to build on that in order to achieve a better difficulty balance. So it's funny that it's still very much a hard as hell game. Because, make no mistake, this game is freaking brutal. So,
and just to build on that point, in the creation of fair parts instead of unfair parts, boy, I can't believe I'm still bitter about this. Like, not entirely successful there, Mr. Kitamura. Because, as Brandon can attest to, because we talked about this earlier, is it the first stage of Dr. Wily, Brandon, with those floating platforms and the spikes?
Yeah, it is.
That is horrendous.
Yeah, but then again, I'm going to play devil's advocate and say that I think it is harder because, and I don't know if it's a glitch or if it was an intended effect in the game, but when you get hit and fall right through the platform, it doesn't feel like that should happen because it doesn't happen every time. And
yes.
That's one of the things that makes it all the more difficult, that you don't know how. I mean, you pretty much assume that you're gonna die when you get there, but like you don't know if the death is gonna feel like it is an intended thing because you're not skilled enough yet to take on that portion, or because it's of a glitch or something that shouldn't be happening in the game. But just definitely unfair feeling regardless. It's
and those floating platforms. The fact now, I don't know if you found like a pattern to them, but it seemed random to me.
No, it was completely. There was one time I landed and I had to wait a solid minute before the first platform got down to where I could even jump to it. So,
and there are times where you're waiting on the platform to jump down, and the platform just mushes you into the ceiling spikes.
Right.
And it's not. And guys, I'm telling you, it's random. Like it's not like there's a set amount of time. Like in the later games where it's like, oh, I'm about to hit those spikes, I have to wait for the perfect time to jump. There is no perfect time to jump, right?
Yeah.
Like you either jump and die, or you get squished and die.
Or you wait and die.
And I'm getting so angry just thinking about it.
and I don't know if it's because like Mega Man is a robot, but he falls very fast. So like, if you miss something,
are you accounting the weight of the robot?
Right, you hit those spikes with such devastating assertion.
Yeah.
Well, it does feel like there are certain portions in the game where, like, not only Mega Man 1, but in the later Mega Man games that the platforming feels very random. Like, there are some elements in Mega Man 5 or Mega Man 3 where there may be dropping, like, I don't know what you call it, like dropping, like, blocks or whatever, and they feel very random, and you're like, okay, well, you know, whenever there are two in a succession, I'll jump after that, and then a third one jumps in succession, which hadn't happened before.
You're talking about Crystal Man stage, right?
Yes, Crystal Man
fuck
stage,
that guy.
of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't like that level either.
That level sucked.
I will say this as something that we haven't really touched on, and I just want to get your guys' opinion on it. Mega Man, especially starting with the first, but probably through the first three, Mega Man as a character was also like one of the most expressive like characters in like a video game of this time that I've played. Like,
yeah, good point.
I like to jokingly say that that Mega Man's best contribution at this point for the first game was just the jump sprite. The jump sprite for Mega
with the
Man
mouth open and
is the most ridiculous thing ever,
It's
and
awesome.
I love it. I fucking love it.
It's great. I mean, it does feel like animation. It feels like it was really a cartoon. I mean, if I was a kid at the time, which I wasn't, because as with Arnie, I wasn't born.
Yeah.
I would have been totally over the moon about this. And that character sprite has just become emblematic of video games.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very expressive, and he also blinks, which, come on, your character blinks.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: is they sell the story. Like, Mega Man is supposed to be obviously a kid, and the way he jumps, like mouth open, legs splayed in the air, like sort of like he's doing a superhero pose every single time, is just like. Is so childlike.
Yeah, I can't be the only one who goes through the retractable doors jumping every time because he freezes in place and just like get to enjoy that sprite for like a few seconds.
It's the best. And then when you get hit, he has like a what is he, like closes his eyes and also opens his mouth, like like it looks like he's hurt. You know, it's not like Mario where he just shrinks, or even something like Castlevania where, you know, when you're jumping you just like sort of go up. And then when you get hit, you sort of like lean back. This is so much more, just expressive, and like it really, like when Mega Man gets hit, it's painful. Like I'm like, oh no, like
no, it has like the crunching sound effect that goes with it.
When he falls a brick to those spikes, it really hurts.
Oh yeah,
it's terminal velocity like immediately.
But Arnie, to your point, I really do think that this feels like a game that it was made as a labor of love. Like, it really does feel like all these developers really put a lot of heart into this. And you know, between Kitamura and Inafune and the like, they really focus on a lot of little details that you typically would not see at the time. And you could tell that they really wanted the player to discover secrets. They wanted the player to identify with this little blue character, this blue robot. It really does feel like a labor of love, and I think that kind of comes through in the game, and I don't doubt it's a big part of why Mega Man is so popular.
Yeah, I mean, reading that interview with Kitamura and talking about how he pictured Mega Man, I mean, it was without missing a beat. He had this very clear picture in his head of who Mega Man was, and I mean, the analogies he made to being like a child that didn't fit in, you know, that was kind of lost, and it
broke my heart just reading that.
It was really
and then it just kind of clicked.
Really sad, but But you're right. There is this really empathetic quality to Mega Man, and obviously through the animations and him having different expressions. But I do feel like playing it as a kid, we connected a lot more to him than we would some other sprite in another game. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't like the bulky, roided out, gung-ho Rambo character. I mean, we just talked about Contra, so we were just, talking about that particular childhood fantasy. He seemed like a kid that could have been in your schoolyard, and he just to talk about the story, Mega Man was created by Dr. Light. Dr. Light is this kind of like wizened Geppetto type, scientist. Mm-hmm. And he makes these robots, and one of them is Rock, which is his assistant, and he makes his sister Ro, which was kind of like the house, assistant. And some of the robots that Dr. Light creates, they go rogue, and so it's up to Rock with his sense of justice. He decides to contribute and volunteer to become Mega Man, and so be altered to have like this arm cannon and the like. And so it feels like one of your friends, and it feels like what every kid wanted. Like, I wanna fight for what's right, and I know that just because my sense of empathy and justice, I could do this. So it's a very much a relatable character. Compared to all the other characters.
I will say, last thing I will say just regarding Mega Man in this specific game is that to build off of that, what you just said is, Mega Man to me, because there's nothing more like that breaks immersion to me more than like having to play like the super cool, never does anything wrong. Like when I'm playing Simon Belmont, who's supposed to be like this amazing vampire hunter, and I'm just falling in pits all the time and like getting my ass kicked up and down the castle. Like,
and you can't jump very well.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't feel like I'm this super vampire hunter, but with Mega Man, it's like he doesn't know anything more than I do about what's happening in all of this. Yeah. So I can identify with him a lot more because we're both like sort of trying to figure this out and hopefully not dying.
Yeah, and I think the way you start each Mega Man game is just with the Mega Buster as as kids, knowing that like, okay, you're this little blue guy and you've got this one thing that you can do. If you work really hard, you'll be able to do other things, which is analogous with life, you work really hard as a kid. You don't necessarily learn how to freeze people in time or shoot fire. You might learn Microsoft Excel, so it's not the same. But
if you murder your boss, then you will absorb his knowledge.
You will get his knowledge. Exactly.
Region Free Gamers, where you get a life lesson with each episode.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, anything more on Mega Man 1 that you want to cover, Paul?
Just the no.
It's difficult.
I was going to say no and then list three things. So the answer, in fact, is yes.
Okay.
No, just I found it amusing. Like look, we have to talk about the cover of the American box.
Yes, please. And we need a solid hour.
Figured out who actually drew that?
This cover. The disgruntled construction worker with a pistol.
Hear me out for a second. Mega Man 1's box cover art, horrendous.
Yeah.
But are we gonna pretend like it got any better even past the like first three games? Like even in 4 and 5, he still looks like a troll. Like that doesn't look like Mega Man.
Okay, nice try, buddy. Nice try. No, the first one is like several orders of magnitude worse than the remainder. Come on now.
It's horrible. Well, and the thing, from what I have heard, it turns out that the person who drew it, I don't know if we've ever figured out who it was.
Because he's in exile now.
He's somewhere in Siberia, which is we sent him to a bikini tour or like whatever. No, he hadn't even played the game. He was just told, hey, we have this game where the guy, the character shoots from his arm or whatever, and so if you have no idea whatsoever, then you're gonna come up with a disgruntled construction worker that has a gun in his arm.
Yep. So and apparently he had to do it overnight. Like they went to him. It was like a friend of the publisher, and he's like, "Hey, I need this tomorrow. Can you draw something?"
Well,
and the guy was like,
"I'm not familiar. What is the Rockman 1 cover? Is it
I think it's just
it's drawn by Keiji Inafune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's Mega Man and I think the Robot Masters like all in a cool little anime pose, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great.
And it looks very Astro Boy-ish.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
But still probably much more suiting
attractive.
than, yeah.
Much better than what we got
Right.
over here.
Incredible.
No, but that, I think it's probably like the cover boy for like bad video game box art.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it has to be the worst. I mean, it's right up there with Mobile Life Force and a few others that I'm not recalling now. But it's definitely top 3, if not the top worst cover art.
So
at least in terms of egregiousness.
In reading for this podcast, I found out that, I don't know if you guys are aware, but you can actually play as bad box art Mega Man in Street Fighter vs. Tekken.
Oh, I did hear about
Yes,
this.
you can.
That's
Yes,
amazing.
Yes, you can.
And
But he's
Yeah,
also
it's
like fat, isn't he?
yeah,
he's
and
fat.
I saw videos, and I'm like, how do I not own this game?
Right.
It is awesome. It is it's so good.
And it's awesome, Paul, that Capcom has actually recognized bad box art Mega Man. Like, they've actually put it into the canon. Like, there is an actual bad box art Mega Man. So it's kind of taken on a life of its own.
Not
I'm
only
thrilled.
that, the bad box art Mega Man is a man, right?
Yes.
It really is. a
Yeah,
man.
and
Yeah.
it's a child, and it's a young kid, and we've got a guy who's like seemingly in his 50s, possibly alcoholic.
But in his defense, Brandon, I mean, if you're told, draw something that about a character named Mega Man. I mean, if you were told Mega Boy, then
Yeah,
maybe,
and we need
if-
this by 8 a.m. tomorrow. I'd be like, okay.
Paul, I just want to mention, with respect to the hardness of the first Mega Man, I tried this game again last night before recording, and I promptly decided to just not put myself through it, because it's just so difficult. And one of the aspects of it is that Mega Man in this game is so much more slippery than he would be in the later games.
Oh,
Yeah, totally.
And that slippery factor just completely throws you off. And like a lot of the platforms are not like well positioned, so that the platform is like right above you, so that you have to jump out and then jump back. It's things like that make it extremely frustrating when you add the additional frustration of the slippery slope. A lot of some of the enemies you can't necessarily reach with your Mega Buster, and so it's a very frustrating game. The first one. It's still good. I still think it's good, but it's definitely a game that, compared to its successors, I don't think it has aged as well. And it's definitely like, a game for those that already love Mega Man. And one of the things that struck me about the first one is that it doesn't even have an intro. It just kind of goes into like the title screen.
Title screen's the first thing you see.
Yeah, and then you go into the Robot Masters. And also, I mean, just to not, lose the emphasis on that, I mean, the idea of being able to try out each stage was just so revolutionary at the time. Because even for someone that absolutely sucks like me, I get to try out all the different stages, even though I'm not going to be able to beat them. So there's inherent value in that, because it allows you to just kind of experience the game, even though you're not that good as I am.
Yep. And it does provide, in spite of these slippery controls, which can be very frustrating, it does provide some, like, in my opinion, classic, like, gameplay set pieces.
Mm-hmm.
The Yellow Devil boss at the end of Dr. Wily, the first level, that boss is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, especially once you get the pattern down, it's still not easy. And for me anyway, it always felt like it went down to the wire. And I was, like, either really close or, just barely beat it.
Yeah, so
Lots
Paul, I
of fun.
take it you beat him in a traditional way, not utilizing the pause trick.
You know what's funny, dude, is that I actually either forgot about the pause trick or didn't know about it. I only found out about it after I beat Mega Man 1, because I was playing it on the Legacy Collection on the PS4.
Okay.
And the Legacy Collection has these challenges, and you can see the replays for people who have also beat those challenges. Mm-hmm. And I saw replays of some people who just, like, paused it really fast. And I was like, son of a bitch.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Mecha Dragon, so I think it's only fair to also talk about the Yellow Devil.
Yeah.
Another amazing sprite, 100 times more terrifying than Mecha Dragon. Mecha Dragon looks like a fun time, like
it's
hey,
something you might see like at a kid's mini golf or whatever.
Exactly. The Yellow Devil is something I see in the deepest reaches of my nightmares.
And the teleporting mechanic was so terrifying.
Oh yeah,
because you were just constantly on your toes, like constantly like, oh snap, and then you had to like figure out the pattern, and it was only through dying over and over and over again that you would be able to figure out the mechanic.
And I think my playthrough on Mega Man 1 was hurt by having played that same boss in Mega Man 3 because I relied so much upon the sliding mechanic, and I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but I kept seeing pieces flying towards me. I was like, okay, I'll slide under that one, but then you can't in Mega Man 1.
Exactly.
So I got hit way more than I wanted to, whereas if I didn't have that context necessarily, I think I would have done a no damage run on him. Joking.
Paul, now that Brandon mentions no damage, we gotta love the scoring system in this game.
Oh yeah, Mega Man 1, you get those points.
Yeah. They mean everything.
Is the point system still in like the Legacy Collection re-release?
Oh, it is. The Legacy Collection is very, very authentic. Yeah, they
great.
Down to the slowdown, they've managed to emulate everything.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
No.
Yeah, it's pretty much perfect.
But it's nice in being indicative of the time, though. The things that were important in most other games, they included in this one, because they seem to be a factor. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I go into work each day and talk about my Mega Man high score and compare with other people.
Absolutely.
That's how it should be. Paul, before we move on, I just wanted to mention that one of the things that came out of the Kitamura interview is that Cutman was actually supposed to be the star of the game rather than Mega Man. So just try to think about what
that was
that
amazing
game would
to
have
read.
been like. Yeah. I don't know what that would have worked. I mean, you were supposed to cut things with your scissors.
With my head scissors.
Like, on one hand, I totally want to play it. On the other hand, so glad they didn't go that route.
Then we would have Bad Box Art Cut Band, and that would be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, a guy with a duct tape pair of scissors to his head.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it would have been like.
That's
awesome.
And last thing on Mega Man 1 is that I found it super interesting when I was going through all the different Robot Masters that the ones from Mega Man 1, with obviously a few notable exceptions, seem to be some of the most well-remembered ones, even though that wasn't necessarily the most popular game, like Cutman, Gutsman, Elecman, like all these guys are still like very fondly remembered and like very relevant to Mega Man.
Yeah.
I don't know so much about Gutsman, though. I still don't know what a Gutsman is.
That's true. But they brought him back. They made the Guts Dozer in Mega Man 2, I think.
Yeah, there was.
Just a giant version
but you're right. I think Guts doesn't necessarily readily equate to the power that you have. Like, oh, he's got a lot of guts. He's strong. Like, I thought his power was going to be some type of intestinal projection.
Yeah, like he would like projectile vomit onto you or something.
Haggis, man. All right, guys. On that note, let's take another little break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about Mega Man 2 and 3. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, and so we're back, and we're going to be diving into many people's favorite Mega Man 2, released December 1988 in Japan, and then June 1989 in North America, and as usual, the PAL release lagging far behind December of 1990.
Poor European guys.
Oh man, they just get the shaft over and over.
Yeah. with Protector getting late releases, not getting any Final Fantasies, not getting any RPGs almost.
No respect. No respect.
It's hard. It was hard out there for the European.
So a lot of the same team here for Mega Man 2, Kitamura Inafune is back. The music notably composed by Takashi Tateishi. And, I didn't even know he existed until like 6 months ago or something, where I was like, I gotta find out who did this music exactly. And very interesting little fact about Takashi. After Mega Man 2, he joined Kitamura at a company Kitamura formed, Takeru, and then he went to Konami. And at Konami, he worked on the sound team, but didn't do any composing. And the reason he didn't do any composing was because Konami already had so many talented people. He just kind of deferred to them. He's like, oh, these people are so good, I'm not going to bother. Which is like the most...
Which is a shame.
What's that?
Yeah. It's a shame.
Oh my God.
What would have been?
What would have been? Like, dude, you composed one of the greatest 8-bit, possibly the greatest 8-bit soundtrack ever. And yet you're so Japanese, like he just, senpai.
Yeah. Speaking of music, that intro.
Oh, it's so good.
Like the greatest.
Yeah.
Like just the build up to it and then the punch in the face when it finally like just splashes the logo on the screen.
Yeah.
And we're seeing like the bottom of this building with this kind of dreamy music, and then it's going up and building, and you're like, oh shit, Mega Man's on that building.
Well, on top of that, it's almost like he almost has like this Batman pose.
Yeah, totally.
Over, just like brooding over the city.
And his hair is like, breezing in the air. And then when you press start, he gets his helmet on, and that's it. It's time to
roll.
So good. So good. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys were aware of this. I didn't realize it actually until after I beat Mega Man 1 last week. The beginning of that intro is the ending music from Mega Man 1.
Oh, which I did not hear because my Mega Man 1 literally froze as Wily was falling out of his ship last night. And
oh my God!
It was so incredibly frustrating. But now that makes me want to actually beat it again just to see that element, because that's super cool that they tied that back in.
Brandon, this wouldn't have happened if you had used save states. So.
That is very true. I was literally like shaking the cart on my top loader to see if I could somehow get it to click back in, and it didn't work.
Not
How many times has that ever worked? I think
none.
The answer is 0. Yeah,
none at all.
Well, Paul, I mean, just to kind of round out the discussion on the music, Tateishi, he said that he struggled with this game and composing this game. I mean, basically he was brought in and he had an idea of what Mega Man should be or the like, and he brought it to Kitamura, and Kitamura just listened to it and he said, oh, this is not going to work. This is just too peppier for Mega Man. This is just not. He said it sounded more like something in Bobble Bobble as opposed to something in Mega Man, and it just didn't work with the levels itself. So Tateishi was forced to go back and kind of he was told, don't focus on the melodies, just focus on the rhythm. Mm-hmm. And the way that they say it, when Tateishi composed the Wily Castle Stage 1, he calls in Kitamura, he says, I got something for you. And it's almost like a sly, you're gonna listen to this. And then when Kitamura listens to Wily Castle Stage 1, they just look at each other and say, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah. And,
the way that he says it is we were finally professionals. We finally had something that we could, stand up with, any one of them. What Kitamura said was, that song for Tateishi and myself represented a combination of all of our efforts on this music. It instilled in us this feeling like we were real pros now. And it's hard to argue against that. I mean,
it's 100%.
Wily Castle Stage 1 is just amazing. It's so complex for an NES song at the time. It has all these progressions, and even it repeats, but it repeats in a way that feels very, different, and it feels like it changes up. It doesn't feel like you're listening to the same thing over and over again.
It signifies all the hard work you've done up until that point, defeating the individual robot masters, and when you get to that stage, you really have that sense of, okay, I'm ready to take this on.
It feels like you've gone, you built yourself up, and now you have the strength to take on Dr. Wily. and now you're going into the castle, and
Yeah.
you freaking storm the castle.
And here's one thing I will say is that I don't think that I've ever, and this might just be a product of having watched all the games back to back to back, but after watching Mega Man 1 and then coming into Mega Man 2, the jump in graphical quality was insane to me. It's so much brighter. The levels are so much so they're like able to breathe more in a sense. Like they're so much tighter, they're designed so much better.
Yeah.
I was impressed to think that these two games were like on the same system and we're not even that far apart in development.
No,
Right,
no,
right.
Lightyear.
Mega Man
No.
2 is light years
Yeah,
ahead of Mega Man 1.
in Mega Man 1, there's a
graphic.
lot of repetition of little scenes. Like, you'll get through a platforming
Yeah.
section, and you'll come to the exact same platforming section, where Mega Man 2, I never got that feeling, or at least as much.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and going back to Mega Man 1, you do realize that the game's graphics, when you come from the older games, you realize that they really did make wonderful things with the NES hardware after the first one. And they really got very comfortable with building the sprites. So that's a very good point, Arnie.
Yeah. I mean, just like Airman stage, like those big red, I don't even know what to call them. They're like these giant platforms with these like really big expressive faces on them.
yeah, and
Yep.
there's
the ones
enemies
I'm
getting
talking
shot
about,
out
like-
of each side of them, yeah.
Yeah, and they're so cool. I was like, oh my god, it's like so detailed and so like, it's like a very good use of the NES color palette, like just big bold colors everywhere. And it just makes it like fun. It's like, I just want to be in this world. It's like so cool looking, aside from the fact that every single thing is trying to kill me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know,
Which makes it all the more impressive that they only had 3 months to make this game.
yeah,
I mean, they said that it was so down to the wire that they couldn't even playtest anything. They literally built something, made sure it didn't crash, and then just put it out.
But
and then it was like the best selling
yeah,
thing
and
ever.
not only that,
Yeah,
but they,
yeah,
they
whatever.
fixed a lot of that slippery feeling that
Yeah.
Paul, I know that you played through Mega Man 1, and on the latter stages, there were latter stages in the Wily Castle where I felt for sure it was an ice effect. Or just like
Yeah.
subtle, but then I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's not. But I remember thinking that on multiple occasions, but Mega Man 2, you never get that. If there's a change in how your character moves and controls, it's very representative of the elements that the character is in. So, and they had
Yes.
water in Mega Man 2, where they didn't have water in Mega Man 1, so there was a change in the vertical component as well.
Yep.
Which
Yeah,
is
it
a lot of
presented this
fun,
different
too.
environments. Yeah.
Sorry, Ozzy, what?
Yeah.
No, it presented different environments with different characteristics, and each level felt like its own thing. Like, for example, a level where you're like trying to go down through the lasers. I mean, the first time I played it, I was so
Oh,
frustrated.
yeah.
Oh, Quick Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I was so frustrated at first when I got through that. But then you kind of learn the pattern and you just have to execute. So each level feels like it has its own characteristic and it feels very much its own. Unlike maybe the first one where you had different backgrounds and the like, but it still felt like like it was a level, like just like it was just a variation of similar things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the levels were a lot more distinctive in 2, for sure.
And Woodman, the greatest robot master of all time.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Well,
I freaking love Woodman's power. The leaf shield.
Oh yeah, the leaf shield is great.
It's really awesome,
But the design
I
of
don't-
Woodman,
I walk around
was just
town and I
like-
see leaves. I'm like, these don't get enough respect.
Oh my god.
It was much better than the Star Shield in Mega Man 5, which was completely useless. So there you go.
God,
Mega
that's so
Man
funny you say
1
that. I
firepower also had a circular force field effect, but it wasn't as distinctive, I think, as Leaf Man. I mean,
Yeah.
or when I learned with Leaf Man on those moving platforms, I can't remember what stage in the game, where you just turn that on and it kills everything around you on the moving platforms, and how much easier that makes it. It really is an effective power-up.
Well, the release for Mega Man 2 also was the only game with an easier difficulty option.
Oh, right.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Brandon, what do you think of that? Like, do you think it affected how popular it was? Did it affect your enjoyment of it?
I think that, I can't remember at the time when I first played it. I think if I was coming from Mega Man 1 and having like some, good degree of experience with Mega Man 1 and knowing how difficult Mega Man 1 is right off the bat, seeing that at the start screen would have been a relief. It would have been, okay, I can actually ease into this game a bit more. So maybe it did make it a bit more accessible for people at the time. I've never played it on the difficult mode. Have you guys played it on?
Yeah,
I haven't.
I did when I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't like it. Right?
I don't
like
do that to myself.
What's that?
I said I would never.
Yeah, I
do
mean,
that
the
to
thing
myself.
is, it still is already tough. I don't think
Yeah.
it's a game anybody would say, unless we're including the aforementioned speedrunner who jumps over the one-ups. I don't think it's a game anybody would say, like, oh, it's way too easy. It's...
Yeah. But I mean, giving people options is never a bad thing. Like having that ability to choose how difficult you want it to be, I think is great.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you the opportunity, once you've beaten it once, if you want a more challenging game, gives you replayability to a certain degree.
Yeah. I know for me, I found that I got so used to the normal mode and the rhythm, and then you do the hard mode, and suddenly all the enemies that took one hit to kill now take 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Or, for example, in Metal Man's stage, you have that enemy where it's like 4 cylinders stacked on each other, and one of the cylinders is a face. On normal mode, you kill that enemy, and he just vanishes. On hard mode, you kill him, and then all the cylinders disperse, and you have to dodge them.
Wow.
And it just, like, it messes with that rhythm.
It's gotta be.
that I
Capcom
got
had
so
to have
used
been doing some grand sweeping psychological experimental masochism just by having that option. Like, how much do you hate yourself?
Yeah.
Pick this.
Yeah, apparently I didn't hate myself enough.
You're like, it needs to be harder.
Can you imagine if they had statistics at the time? What they would have figured out if they could have actually said, okay, how many people
actually hit
use the hard mode?
to the hard
Yeah.
mode. Yeah.
I would have never done it. I just know.
Yeah. And so before we move on to 3, it should be noted that the cover art, they
Yes.
still didn't get it right. I mean,
This
it
is
looks,
worse to me.
What's that?
This is worse than Mega Man 1 to me, only because at this point, you know, right? Like, you know that this is not what Mega Man looks like.
It is
Well, at least it's blue now.
Incredible that could happen.
Well, he still holds a gun, as you wrote here.
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
Why?
I mean, it looks a lot better, right? He doesn't he doesn't look
The
like
suit
the
actually
disgruntled
looks like
construction
Mega
worker.
Man's suit.
Pardon?
I was just saying the suit actually looks correct this time, at least.
Yeah, it's
But
not.
it's
not
still a
baggy.
man.
Yeah, it is still
still a
a
man.
man. Yeah, absolutely.
I will never for the life of me figure out what the American localization teams were thinking at the time. Like, you see something as beautiful as the animation in the Japanese box arts, and then they just completely butcher it when it comes over to the States. I will never figure out why they did that.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be such a prevalent issue even well into the 90s.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it was something like late 90s that they actually stopped doing that and had some faith in, animation can actually work in the US.
It was a victim of, for some reason, North America's sort of reluctance to just put anime or like Japanese looking designs on box art for anything. For some reason, when they designed like American cover art, it had to be like this sort of fantasy type or real life sort of designs.
Right.
Like Deadly Towers is like that, Metal Gear is like that,
Yeah.
Contra is like that. It was just like, for some reason, that was a thing they were doing.
The artist for this one we actually do know who he is, and he
nice.
was interviewed about it. And in a nutshell, the interview ends with, "Hey, don't blame me. They told me he had a gun."
They told me he had a gun.
Which I thought was just the greatest quote.
That's something
Mega
a
Man or,
police
like, the guy in the
sketch
room?
artist would hear. Like, you know, he had a gun. Okay.
Like, I'm not sure if he's talking about Mega Man or like the representative from Capcom who like held him at gunpoint while he drew this.
He told me he had a gun, and he also had a gun.
Awesome.
All right.
Oh, jeez. So I don't think we're gonna do any better than that. On to Mega Man 3. Mega Man 3 released 1 year later, September 1990 in Japan, November 1990 in North America, and PAL, as usual,
Wow.
they got it June of 92.
That's crazy.
Which is
That's
madness,
terrible.
because, I mean, you've already got the
Yeah.
Super Nintendo by
The
that
Super
point,
Nintendo
right?
out.
New production team, Kitamura left after part 2, which in retrospect is kind of sad. He was replaced with 2 people, Tokuro Fujiwara, who directed Ghouls and Ghosts and Bionic Commando, and I was very pleased to find that he went to do Sweet Home on the NES, and that Sweet Home was the inspiration for Resident Evil,
Yeah.
which was really cool.
And he actually, as you say here, he produced it. He produced Resident Evil.
Yeah, and he produced Resident Evil. Resident Evil was like the sweet home that he always wanted to make. But that's a whole other episode for us.
Yep.
Directed by Masahiko Kurokawa, and he had worked on Strider and Chippendale Rescue Rangers. After Capcom, he went to do Tomba and Tomba 2 on the PlayStation, a couple of very underrated games. Art team pretty much like new team, but Inafune, of course, is the overlord. And the music done by Yasuaki Fujita, relatively new Capcom employee, and he later returned to do Mega Man 10 as well. Fujita had a little bit of help from another person named Fujita, whose first name I can't remember, and she did the first few songs, and then she had to go away on mat leave. So, I don't know, it's funny when I think of video games, and they're this, you know, kind of fun escapism, whatever, but in real life, people go on mat leave, and then somebody else takes over their work for them, right?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Paul, what I found interesting about the development of Mega Man 3 was that, as Kitamura said, he actually left the new team with some instructions, you know, and he had 3 instructions, which is don't update the basic gameplay system, change items 1 to 3 into a robot dog, and then introduce a new prototype robot, number 000, which would be Mega Man's mysterious brother. So the big changes to Mega Man 3 were actually Kitamura changes, which I did not realize. And perhaps you could talk about those 2 things, which is Rush and Proto Man. And who doesn't love Rush?
Yeah.
Dude? I mean, he's like a robotic Pluto. I mean, he's amazing. He looks so cute with his tongue out, you know, and he's so. I mean, when he turns into a jet or he turns into a submarine, I mean, I could just like, you know, squeeze those cheeks, like, you know, it's. I just want to pet it.
Yeah, the Humane Society needs to use Rush in their advertisements.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But that's the thing is they I mean, Rush is just as expressive as Mega Man, right? So they sort of did the same thing, and he's awesome. Like, I love Rush.
Yeah, I have
Although,
all day
you know,
for
maybe I would hope not, but maybe Dr. Light turned a regular dog and turned it into a robot.
Oh, no.
Maybe the Humane Society would take issue.
Oh,
with
that's
that.
true.
So
Yeah.
I don't know, because he looks too real
Yeah,
to not have been
we
a
don't
real
want
dog at some
people
point.
getting arrested for turning their dogs into submarines. So.
Yes.
And here's what I will say. My one contribution to Proto Man is that as much as I love the music in Mega Man 2, that little Proto Man jingle is so fucking cool.
It really
Yeah,
is.
That little like that little whistle sound. I'd never heard that in an NES game before, and I was like, "Oh my fucking god, this is amazing!"
Yeah.
Well, you know, and it announces Proto Man. When
Exactly.
you hear it, you're like, "Oh man, Proto Man's coming!" You know, and then you had to fight him because he, you know, the story here is that Proto Man was the first robot that Dr. Light designed, but he made him too much of a robot. He didn't give him enough like humanity. And so I think Proto Man escaped, and then he had an issue with his core, so he made a deal with Dr. Wily to like fix his core. So that's why, you know, throughout the game, he's just trying to do Dr. Wily's bidding in order to have his core fixed. So it just kind of, announces, that whistle announces, oh, Proto Man's here. And he's kind of like a good, then bad, then bad, then good. You never really know, where he stands. He's almost like an anti-hero of some sort.
Yes.
He's the Racer X to Mega Man Speed Racer.
Oh, yes,
Ooh,
absolutely.
very
And
good.
it turns out to be his brother as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
So, yeah, Proto Man's
and it's
great.
good they had that whistle too, because none of the other enemies have that type of audio introduction, that quick, within the gameplay. So it kind of put, even when you're fighting them through, the regular Robot Master levels, you're wondering, who is this person? He's got to be different than the rest of these enemies. So.
Yes.
And he wears sunglasses, so that automatically makes him the cool bro.
Oh, absolutely, man. Sunglasses and a scarf.
Mega Man's like, can I
there's a
get some
Mega Man
hand-me-downs
movie-
here? Please?
No,
That's
if there's a
awesome.
Mega Man movie, he's played by Johnny Depp. For sure.
Oh, that's awesome. Which made me really, wish that we would have gotten a Mega Man movie back in the day.
Does it,
You know,
though?
kinda
Does
like-
it really make
Does
you
it?
wish
Does
that?
it actually?
Because
it
we
would have
got
been so
Double Dragon
awful.
and
It
Super
would have
Mario
been so
Brothers.
awful.
We got Double Dragon, we got Mario.
You got Street Fighter, you got Mortal Kombat, you got enough. Be thankful for what you have.
But Paul, another thing about this game, and let me just say, this is my favorite Mega Man game, and we're gonna fight this out. But the big reason why is the slide.
Yeah.
I freaking love the slide. I mean,
The slide is a really good addition.
It just feels so good. It feels so good, and it makes you go so much faster. And the thing about the slide is that when you have a hard boss or a tricky pattern, like jump, slide, it makes you feel so cool. You know, when you actually get into that rhythm. Which, when I went back to Mega Man 1 and 2, I didn't have that. And I was man.
There's nothing you
I
can
could
do
use
in
the
1 and
slide
2
here.
to change your speed at all. Even whether it's walking side to side or climbing a ladder up or down, unless, again, you're falling like a brick onto spikes, you move at the exact same speed all the time, where the slide, not only letting you dodge, head level projectiles, it is quick. It's like a quicker way to kind of get by something, or, it was a needed mechanic, for sure.
Yeah, or even if you're running away from a boss, the boss is just kind of chasing you, you do some slides, and that gives you enough distance to kind of turn back and shoot. It just presents this added layer that was not complex, but just created enough variation that it made it a lot more thrilling and exciting for me.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think
So I don't know if you feel the same way, Paul. I thought
I
the
do.
slide was a great addition.
The slide, I think, is an excellent addition. It's super simple, very intuitive. It has a great animation, like a great sprite design. It looks hilarious. It looks like the jump, but just sideways. I friggin' love it.
Yeah.
And replaying it, fighting those bosses and having that slide available, it just makes it that much more engaging, that much more, I don't want to call it nail biting, but almost, right? Because there are points where when you slide and you just narrowly miss getting hit by the boss because you slide out from under him.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Guys, can we talk? What is Gemini Man?
That's a
What the hell
really
is
great
up with
question.
that guy? I don't really know what he is, and then he has those, egg sperms, throughout his levels, which I don't know what they're about. I'm playing through this, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. What are you doing with your life, Ozzy?
Yeah, this is something that is probably one of the things I like the most about Mega Man is the concepts for all these Robot Masters, because unlike other series, Mega Man is very much built around the Robot Masters.
Right. Yes.
And by not reusing the same Robot Masters, you force yourself to create a unique set of bosses for every single game. And obviously, the creativity is tested very quickly when you do this many. I mean, because first game had 6, then 8 from then on. So by the time you get to the third game, you're already 14 Robot Masters in, and you need 8 more. There's only so many elements. There's only so many animals. There's only so many. So now you got to start sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Totally.
here.
And it's some of them are so vague in a way too, or like Hard Man. Is he Hard Man because he's difficult, or is he the opposite of Flaccid Man?
That's, dude, I can't believe it. Like, it's yet another thing as a kid that I didn't find funny. I didn't even notice, and now as an adult, I'm like, Hard Man is just the best.
It's so good.
Like,
And
it's
I don't
like
know
if
I don't know
Marvel
if
made
he's
a
just
superhero
hard because
for
he's
porno.
like a gang member or
Yeah,
something.
that's
He feels like a really
he's
hard
been
attitude.
toughened over,
What?
over gang hazing.
And that's not even getting to the power-up, which is Hard Knuckle, which just confused me even further, because I was like, okay, so, like, are his fists hard? Does he have, like, fists of steel?
Right.
Like, what's the backstory to Hard Man? I need a Hard Man, like, spin-off game.
All I hope is that in Mega Man 11 they have an erect man. Like, that's what I'm banking on now.
But he's just like Electric Man, but they, like, just misspelled the L.
Yeah, but it's amazing. So, I mean, if we're talking about Robot Master naming fatigue already happening in 3, and we've had literally 400 Mega Man games, like, what's going on, you know? It's got to be tough. I mean,
I guess,
especially in the idea that you're supposed to, and this was in the interview as well, but, like, you're supposed to be able to start intuitively knowing what, I think Kitamura said that he wanted it to be like, okay, ice would beat fire, you know, that type of thing. Same like rock paper scissors concept, just knowing logistically which one would beat the other, you know. But it also becomes an issue.
But one of the things about this game, I actually prefer the music in this game over 2, and the music in 2 is fantastic. I listening to it over the past week for this podcast. I've just realized that Mega Man 3, it doesn't have a Dr. Wily Castle Stage 1, but almost all of the songs are extremely memorable and catchy. I think that pound for pound, it has more memorable songs than Mega Man 2. And so that's a big part of why I prefer this game over 2. But I don't know, maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I do think that the music in this one is better.
When you mentioned that leading up to this podcast, I went back and listened to it, and there are some serious jams on Mega Man 3.
Yeah.
And like Snake Man theme is awesome. Just
it's so great. It's so great.
Yeah, Snake Man. I thought Top Man was probably my favorite one. And the other tune is when you get your weapon and equip it. Yeah. Like, and obviously the intro song is just ridiculous.
Yeah, the intro's great.
Yeah.
No, it's I understand, Ozzy. I understand why you prefer 3 over 2. And it's cool. Like, we're all wrong sometimes, right? No, for me it's 2. Like,
don't let nostalgia cloud your judgment.
I mean, I think I like 2 more than 3, but I think partially I like 2 because of the context of 1, and kind of feeling the strides that were made between 1 and 2. You know.
Yeah, the jump from 2 to 1 is much bigger than the jump from 3 to 2.
And it's also a matter of timing. Like, if I was a kid and Mega Man 3 was the first Mega Man game that I played, Mega Man 3 would be my favorite today. Yeah. There's very little doubt about that. It's really, really good. Like, they're basically 1 and 1A as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and that's something
3.
with retro games like that. with you cannot disassociate that nostalgia factor from the game, and that's such a good point. I mean, it's for a lot of reasons why I like Pit Fighter more than Mortal Kombat.
Hey man, don't sleep on Pit Fighter.
No, I'm telling you.
But that's such a good point. Like, if you happen to get Mega Man 3 for Christmas instead of Mega Man 2 or whatever, like, it could be a big factor, and I don't think it's one to discredit either. You know, it's we enjoy these games for a variety of reasons. So.
Well, I will give you my objective scientific explanation for Mega Man 3 being better. 1, better music. 2, Rush. 3, Proto Man. 4, Gemini Man.
You skipped over the slide entirely. I love that. I love that you didn't even mention the slide.
I love your objective opinion of the music being better. The music is better. This art form that is completely subjective, it is better.
But I mean, Rush is super cool. Like, I don't think any of us are gonna deny that. Is it the mystery about Gemini Man? Like, what is the...
that was just putting this on.
Lie awake at night wondering where he is, what his backstory is.
Let me tell you, there's no mystery with Hardman. Everybody knows what Hardman is.
Everybody knows what's up with Hardman.
All right. Let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll finish up the rest of the series.
Well,
wrap 4, 5, and 6 anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're back. And Mega Man 4 is the next game on our plate. You know, because we eat games. I don't know what I'm thinking. But yeah, Mega Man 4 released December 1991 in Japan, and then released January of 92 in North America, which, I mean, great job, Capcom. And then January of 93 in Europe, which... I mean, you've got a whole year there, guys. You can't release it for Christmas? What's going on?
It's pretty awful.
I mean, you have to wonder what was the reason behind this. I mean, it's not like you have to change the language or anything like that. I mean, I think in Europe it was just English as well.
Yeah.
So, what was it, the hertz, the difference in hertz, like that it was 50 hertz compared to 60? Did they have to like adapt that for the European TVs? I don't know. It's just kind of befuddling to me as to why it would
really
take a year.
It's what befuddles me is that it took 12 months instead of 11. You know, like...
you guys couldn't crank it out, like, just in December 1992?
What befuddles me is the cover art for this game, because... I will say, this is my last thing on cover art, but this cover art looks like they got the body, they got the suit, they got everything. They still gave him the face of like a 65-year-old man who has like cystic fibrosis or something.
You know what it reminds me of, Arnie? Do you remember that painting that it was like an ancient painting of Jesus, and then some person came in and tried to do a drawing of the face?
Yeah. Oh my god, that's one of my favorite things.
Like the monkey Jesus type thing. Yeah. Like that's what it reminds me of. Basically.
So this is why I'm like, it's not like the later Mega Man cover arts were that much better. Like I feel like 6 is pretty much the only one where it looks like Mega Man as we know him.
Yeah, no, man, no argument here.
But what's even more frustrating, Arnie, is that in the PAL territories, it's the same box art except they just fixed the face.
Are you serious?
So the face, yeah, like it's the same box art, but they fixed the face.
That's why it took 12 months instead of 11.
I need to look
Paul.
that up. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it took 12 months and not 11. They had to redraw the face. Garbage. What is this?
Exactly.
I feel like Mega Man exists in like a pocket dimension, like somewhere there's an alternate universe where we have all the good cover art and everybody else has like this ancient man Mega Man.
Right. Yeah. Very well could be the case.
But Mega Man 4.
Yeah, Mega Man 4, because we're getting mired in box art thanks to Artie.
Sorry.
The only really notable difference here is that the game was directed by Yoshinari Takanaka, who also went on to direct Mega Man X and my favorite puzzle game of all time, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. Oh man, when I read that he did that, I was like, yeah, buddy. Capcom wanted this to be the biggest and best Mega Man game, and so it added cutscenes and it added more backstory. And this is gonna sound completely ridiculous, but like, I finished Mega Man 4 last week, but not before I read the whole story, and I was actually genuinely pissed that I got spoiled. for like an 8-bit game. I couldn't believe
For
it.
what?
I mean, to your credit, based on
but
the Mega Man 1 through 3, you wouldn't have known that, the story would reveal itself in such a way as it does in Mega Man 4.
Yeah.
No, Mega Man 4 has a twist, and I would have been all about that twist if I hadn't been spoiled ahead of time.
Yeah.
But Paul, I mean, I don't think we can understate how impressive that opening cutscene was. That opening animation,
Oh,
just
yeah.
kind of, traversing through the history of the first 3 games and the reason why Mega Man came into existence. You could really tell that Capcom was really trying to, drive this character into the mentality of kids at the time. And compared to like something like Castlevania, like it's not bad writing. I mean, it's very simple and the like, but there aren't any typos and nothing like turning countries from good to bad. Nothing along those lines. And it really did feel like animation. It really did feel like, oh man, this is going to be an awesome adventure. It was a blockbuster. If I could describe Mega Man 4 as something, it would be a blockbuster.
I agree. Yeah, I think I think this game, I think it's really underrated. Like, I mean, Ozzy, did you play it?
Yeah, I played it, and what struck me about it, I mean, the problem with this game has always been that it introduced the chargeable Mega Buster, the Super Mega Buster, and that has always been the knock against it. But as a game itself, like, oh my god, the graphics are amazing. Like, there's a stage where there's like a hippo on top of a platform, and you shoot down the platforms, and the hippo is like shooting things at you, and it's a really nice sprite. It's graphically so impressive.
Yeah.
And like even like the stages like Pharaoh Man stage and Ringman stage, Ringman is a little bit frustrating because it has those disappearing platforms and the like.
Yeah.
But Pharaoh Man stage, I mean, it's so different from everything that has come before in Mega Man. Kind of like with mummies and the like. I do think it's an underrated game. It's weird because it oscillates between being very hard and very easy at times. So the difficulty balance is not that great, but I do think it's a very underrated Mega Man.
And I also think that in doing some reading for it, a lot of people talk about the chargeable Mega Buster and how it kind of breaks the game, and it makes the master weapons kind of irrelevant. I didn't think so. Not with 4. I found that. So we were talking about it earlier, and it's like you guys say, like, when I play an RPG and I have items, I fucking never use the items, right? Like, you always save them just in case you need them. And then by the time you finish your RPG, you've got like 20 elixirs that you've never used. And so it's the same thing with the master weapons, but when I played 4 last week, I actually like kind of took a step back and leaned in and used the master weapons as much as I could during the levels. And it made the game so much more fun. Like, there were all these different solutions to all these different problems, and there were a lot of problems that the Mega Buster couldn't solve. So I didn't think the Mega Buster broke this game in any way, personally.
Yeah, I mean, and I had the same experience, Paul, that I actually started using the power-ups because I knew that I could always rely on the Mega Buster. I could always try to, defeat the enemies. And that's actually what I did when I started playing Mega Man 4. I would just use the Mega Buster, but it really made the power-ups, much more productive in a way. At least that's been my experience as well.
Yeah.
At least on my end, I did want to touch on something here because I feel it's most relevant in Mega Man 4, and that was the design contest for the 8 Robot Masters.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that, Paul?
Yeah, so the previous Mega Man games, they all had contests for Japanese kids where they would submit designs for the Robot Masters, and then Capcom would pick the winning entries, Inafune would clean them up, and the kids would get their names in the credits, which is pretty much the coolest thing ever.
Exactly.
And in Mega Man 4, one of the winning entries each got a gold Mega Man 4 cartridge. And in reading about this game, I found that one of the kids held onto his cartridge and took it to like this Japanese, Antiques Roadshow analog kind of show. And they appraised that gold cartridge at $3,900. And that was crazy. 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so just this, there's only 8 of them that exist, right? It's really, really cool.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, as a kid, that would have been so awesome.
Yeah.
If,
oh my
if you
god!
Had been,
like to be
even if I couldn't draw, I would have still been like pumping out things.
Absolutely.
Just to, like,
yeah,
send
like
it out.
Mom, please
Yeah,
send
and I
in
think
the
it-
shitty drawing, and I have to get in this
To
game.
Japan.
You imagine how many doodles they got. You imagine how much they had to sort through. In terms of
Well,
like.
That's actually something that, in doing some research, there are pictures of like a room in Capcom's office where there's just like a mountain. And when I'm saying a mountain, like this Mega Man 4 had 70,000 entries, Mega Man 5 had 130,000, Mega Man 6 had 200,000. So there are just piles of drawings of different Robot Masters.
Yep.
But I thought it was kind of cool. Like, obviously, you're sort of outsourcing your creativeness to, your fans and stuff. But I think it's really cool, especially as, if you got your Robot Master in it, like, how cool is it to go back and play this game and be like, I designed this, like, character.
Yeah.
Like, I was the
There's
sort of the
nothing
progenitor of this idea.
I wasn't exactly using my time very wisely when looking into this, but I did a little bit of a deep dive on the artist who submitted. I think it was Brightman, the guy who had his cartridge appraised.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, he is now a courtroom artist.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
There you go.
it's pretty cool, man.
Was he not the guy who said that he had a gun?
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
But Paul, before we move on from Mega Man 4, I mean, look, I think the Mega Buster is very controversial, the chargeable Mega Buster. I do think that it made the game a lot slower in how it played because you were always trying to charge. And it also had the collateral that damage that you always had to listen to that, sound
Yes.
of this charged up Mega Buster. And as many know, this charging sound actually took up one of the sound channels. So it effectively cut out one of the instruments in the music. So you could never really hear the music. So I think that's part of the reason why people pile on Mega Man 4. I mean, I don't know. I think the Mega Buster, the chargeable Mega Buster, it's a good and bad thing. It's not like the Slide where it's unanimously an improvement. So it's one of those aspects that your mileage may vary depending upon what you value.
But then again,
I
it's a
can do without
mechanic
it.
that stayed with the series. Like, it was going to get introduced at some point.
Yeah, and it went into Mega Man X, and it became a
Yeah.
big feature of Mega Man X. So it's definitely something that it was not gonna go away.
Yeah.
No, and a couple more quick things. Very, like, a little bit strange, the boss fights in this game. When the boss health meter charges at the beginning of the fight, it drowns out everything. It drowns out all the music, and it goes really slowly. And so all you hear is that sound of the charging, and it's kind of grating. And also the boss music in this game, not very good.
No, it's not. It's not, and it's repetitive, and it just after you listen to it for like 5-6 times, you're like, okay, I could do away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the worst out of the 6, which is unfortunate, because I think this game is otherwise pretty great. Mega Man 5, released in 1992, for Christmas in both Japan and North America, and then obviously later for PAL. Mega Man 5 I thought was a bit of a mixed bag when playing through it last night. Some really...
It's not good.
What's that?
It's not good.
No.
It's not good. I have very strong feelings about Mega Man 5. I actually had to struggle to get through it. And I think the problem is that a lot of the levels repeat themselves, and they're very bland. There isn't that variation of different sets of enemies and jumping, sliding, whatever. It's all very much the same enemies, and even these enemies go from one level to the other. So it's not like there are level-specific enemies that you feel that are tied to that level's theme and the like. And there are long stretches where you do nothing, and there are enemies that just repeat over and over and over again, and that are a drudge to get through, that they're just like bullet sponges. It's, I found it a drudge to get through, to be honest. I think it's not a good game at all.
No, and I thought the Mega Buster in this one's super overpowered. I thought that a lot of the enemies, they just kind of like, they were just jobbers, right? There seemed to be no reason for them to be there. They're so easily killed. And then there are the others,
Yeah.
like you said, that are just bullet sponges.
Yeah, and there's even the variety that you actually ride in like a jet ski of some sort in one of the levels,
Yeah.
and not even that is exciting. I don't.
No.
I mean, usually one of those levels, I'm like, oh yeah, hell yeah, like in Contra or the like. But in this one, it was just like so by the books and so kind of. It really did feel like a very by the numbers game. It really did feel like. The team was just phoning it in.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, let's put this character here and there and here and there, and let's do this level and let's do this other level, and let's call it a day.
Yeah. This one, more than any of the others, seems to be the real black sheep, even more so than 4 or 6. This one seems to be the one that nobody ever talks about.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have heard that some people, see this as their favorite, and perhaps it's because the graphics.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've got a friend here who cites this as his favorite all the time. I'm a bit curious now to really grill him a bit on his reasoning, after doing all this research and playing the Mega Man games like we have in the past couple of weeks here. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And there are some stages that are inventive. I mean, look, Gravity Man stage is very inventive.
Oh, yeah.
I really, really dig that. I mean, any game where you play with gravity is fine by book. If you just insert a gravity mechanic, you're okay. I mean, the boss battle is bullshit. The boss battle is absolute crap.
Oh, no, I disagree, dude. I think, first of all, I think the Gravity Man level might be the best level in the first 6 games. That Gravity Man level, I think, is awesome.
I would not disagree with
redeeming
that.
quality here. And I don't know, the boss fight, like, I think you just have to time those shots right. I thought it was really cool, like the way they switch with each other and the whole thing. But I mean,
Yeah, the problem is you have to use the star power up, which I hated.
Oh,
because
I immediately went to the Mega Buster immediately.
Yeah, so that's probably the reason why. And the Mega Buster is just so much more effective than the star power up. But it, as with a lot of things in Mega Man 5, the bosses just feel like they have the same repeating pattern without any kind of changes.
Yeah.
And so it just feels very formulaic, where it's like, it just feels like a drudge to made it out. It's more of like a war of attrition rather than fun. Whereas something like the Yellow Devil, you're like constantly being kept on your toes. That doesn't feel the same way in this levels. And I don't know. And it has probably to what I consider the worst robot master in all of the Mega Man 1 through 6 games, and that's Charge Man, because that's a freaking train robot master.
Lame. Lame.
I mean, it's so lame. It's incredibly lame, and even his like attacks are just like he shoots like coal out of his like train, choo-choo train, whatever.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
No, he's definitely a Republican boss.
Even more so than Napalm Man.
Oh yeah, Napalm
There's a
Man.
Vietnam level. There's a
Napalm
Vietnam level. Napalm Man. It takes
Napalm
place
Man.
in Vietnam.
That was a bold move, Napalm Man.
Oh man,
and I'm
it's almost as
surprised-
bold as naming a Contra.
Well, see, that's the thing. I'm surprised that they didn't have to change this for like the North American release or something. That seems like something Nintendo would have been all over.
I mean, Vietnam was only 2 decades at that point after that, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, but you actually fight in the jungles, and there are tigers,
Oh my
and
God.
there's a weapon stockpile, and you go through caverns, and they're like, yes, this is literally a Vietnam level. Remember that time Mega Man went to Vietnam? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
It kind of ruins what's so nice about the Robot Masters, where a lot of times you have no idea what the actual attack is going to be. There's not a lot of mystery with Napalm Man. Like...
you're absolutely right. The first time I faced him, I was like, well, there's going to be something that's on the ground here. Get ready to
this
jump.
guy's not going to tickle me to death. Like...
Oh, Brandon, why isn't there a Tickle Man?
Thankfully, they scrapped Agent Orange Man because that would have been much more problematic.
Oh god, he slowly kills you instead of doing it immediately.
Oh Lord.
By the way, guys, God, that's so terrible. This game introduced Beat, which was the bird of destruction. The absolute raining down death upon his enemies, Beat. It was basically an indestructible bird that just took down anything in his path, even bosses. So I think that was a great addition. So it also follows up in the line of cute animal sidekicks, which I am all in favor of.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And Paul, I will need you to read this last note that you put in here about Mega Man 5, because I very much enjoyed this.
Well, yeah, I found so little meat on Mega Man 5. The one thing I did find that has nothing to do with 5, but was worth including, Keiji Inafune, I guess in another... Well, they asked him, it wasn't necessarily self-promotion, but the Hyperdimension Neptunia team put him in Hyperdimension Neptunia Victory. They took Inafune's head, a photo of his head digitized, and put it on the front of a battleship in the game. And when the battleship fires a laser, it fires it out of his mouth and eyes. And I was like, this is just the coolest thing ever. And then you see a picture of it, and it's the coolest thing ever.
Exactly. So his digitized face from Mega Man 5? Like how...
No, dude,
it's like his real face in real life.
Face.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out how it ties into Mega Man 5.
No, not at all.
It doesn't tie into Mega Man 5 at all. That's how little we think of this game.
Yeah,
there's nothing. But the thing I love about it is that it's one of these things where you read about it, and that sounds great, and then you see it, and it lives up every bit to what you thought it was going to be in your mind.
Yes.
Well, just one final point on Mega Man 5. Joko Shimomura, who we love and we've talked about in the past on many points because of Street Fighter and Parasite Eve, she composed the Dr. Wily's stage music. So I think from this point forward, after that, I don't know if she had already composed Street Fighter by this point. Street Fighter, yes, she had, because Street Fighter was 1991.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So she had a contribution to this game. So
yeah, she's
good
awesome.
to see Miss Shimomura coming back.
Yeah.
Mega Man 6?
Mega Man 6, yep. Japan, November 1993. And then, as you said, Ozzy, released in North America by Nintendo in 94. By 94, obviously, the NES was just completely out of style. The Super NES had been around for 3 years now, the Genesis for 4 or 5. And
and the PS1 and Saturn would have released that year. So
the next year for them. But yeah, like they were on the horizon. And so Nintendo had the top loader. They're like, we got to sell some of these units. So they dropped the price. They released Mega Man 6, Star Tropics 2, and... what was the other game I had? Wario's Woods, I think, was the last game they ever released for the NES. Yes. So in order to squeeze some more life out of it. Mega Man 6, I played a little bit, watched a bit of a long play. Mostly unremarkable, except that the jetpack and the Mega Power Man, where you can punch obstacles and enemies, are pretty interesting additions. But when I watched the long play, I'm like, wow, they really kind of mess with the core gameplay of Mega Man by introducing a jetpack.
Yeah. Yeah, it really did. I mean, because before you had the Rush Jet, and the Rush Jet you could actually just kind of get by difficult obstacles, but you were fairly limited. And after Mega Man 3, they made the Rush Jet so that it would continue going forward, and you had limited control of it. But yeah, I mean, the jetpack just kind of messed with those mechanics that just should not be tinkered with.
I agree.
I do think, though, Paul, I mean, I really like the boss masters, the robot masters here. I don't know. I mean, they seem like they are a lot more embellished in like the design. The design seems a lot more complex. Even though, Yamato Man, I mean, I don't know if anyone knows what a Yamato Man is in the US. But Centaur Man, I mean, that's a cool looking sprite, dude.
Really is.
And let's not forget, I mean, this game actually had different, time of day changes to the levels. So sometimes it could be at night and sometimes it could be in the day. Graphically, just the best Mega Man looking game. I mean, the best looking Mega Man game. So I really do like the robot masters in this game, even though they may not necessarily be as memorable as the ones that came from the earlier games.
Yeah, the sprites are very, very big and stylized. They look really cool. Flame Man, though, I don't know. I don't know if you guys, I don't know if Brandon and Arnie, if you guys saw Flame Man, but boy, oh boy, like when his level is based around oil, and it looks like he's wearing some kind of head scarf or turban. Yeah, I don't know, man.
It's an unfortunate design choice.
It's the Al Qaeda, Robot Master.
Yeah, it's not the greatest.
Hey, listen, at this time, the Gulf War had already happened, so this was in the mind probably of like the Japanese and the like. So I don't doubt that. And they had burned the fields in Kuwait and the like. So it was following up in the tradition of Napalm Man and not being very sensitive.
Not being very subtle.
No.
Sensitive, for sure.
So, but
in just talking about the Robot Masters, Nightman, only Robot Master designed by a non-Japanese person.
Nightman and Windman.
Yeah, and
Windman as well. Oh, really? I thought it was just Nightman.
Nightman, the only Robot Master designed by a Canadian, though.
Oh, Daniel Valet. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was through a Nintendo Power contest. So I don't know. Did you guys see this originally with Nintendo Power? Did you have a subscription with this? Arnie, I mean, you don't count. Neither do I. But you, Brandon, and Paul?
My brother and I had Nintendo Power. I don't recall there being a contest because we would have been all over it. Anything like this, if we could submit a character. So no, it doesn't come to mind.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been, I'm sure the issues where it would have been in were probably in the 90s, so it was past the NES time anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I think it was 93, 92.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I know I like this game. I think it's a game that should be re-examined. Quick note, it's super expensive because it came so late in the NES lifespan. I mean, I'm not going to say super expensive, it's just expensive.
Yeah.
If you want to buy it, complete in the box, then that, will jump up the price significantly. But it wasn't a game that even Capcom bothered too much with because at the time they already had the Mega Man X series on the Super Nintendo and they were just kind of focusing on that. So I didn't even bother. I mean, it didn't even release in PAL territories.
No.
So Nintendo just released it in North America. But I do think it's a game that needs to be re-examined. If anything, just because it has such beautiful graphics.
Yeah.
I really do think it's, together with Kirby's Adventure, probably the best graphics that the NES could put out.
Yeah. No argument here. Looks really good. I'd like to play it, if only just to try out those new mechanics and see if they break the game as much as I think they would.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's notable for those reasons. And just to wrap up the show, so just kind of taking the whole thing in, looking at it as a whole, if you had to pick one thing, Brandon, what would you say is the thing that makes Mega Man so special?
To me, at least remembering when I played it as a kid, just getting the boss's powers. I mean, straight up that, and wondering what those powers were going to do. I hadn't played a ton of games at the time, but that was just such a new and cool concept. I think when you're a kid, like, special abilities and superpowers are a thing that you spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about. Like, only if I could fly, only if my eyes could shoot lasers, and just knowing, like, there's this game where you could, like, defeat these bosses and get different powers is just such a cool concept. So that's what always stuck out to me.
Yeah, hey man, I think that would be most people's answer. Ozzy, what about you?
Well, I think, to me, it's just the little blue bomber, as we call him. I mean, he's just so relatable. I find him to be such a warm character. I mean, even compared to his later iterations, like as X and as in Legends and the like, I think the original Mega Man from the original series, there's just an earnestness to him that just kind of exudes from even like the games itself. And when I was reading the interview with Kitamura, he was saying about how there's an inherent loneliness to Mega Man. And that he kind of thinks about the kid playing alone in the back in the playground, and I think that just kind of carries through, and it just makes him such a warm character. And the idea that he fights for justice and he does this because of a sense of justice, and he's completely unflappable. I don't know. It makes him a very relatable character, and I think that's the reason why Mega Man, even now that Capcom has just kind of put him on the back burner, and now it's recently just bringing him back. I think that's why he endures as such an iconic character.
I agree. Arnie, how about you?
It has to, I struggle to think of a game, especially in this era, where so much of the choice was put in the player's hands. the order in which you want to fight these people, what abilities you want to use to do it, the way you want to go through levels. Mega Man was always about letting you play the way that you wanted to play, and stacking that onto amazing music, some of the most expressive sprites that, the NES has seen, with, tight controls, just made for an awesome experience, like, all around. And that's pretty much it. It's just the ability to sort of play the game the way you want to.
And I think,
what about you, Paul?
I think I'm with Arnie in what I think of in Mega Man is just like a superlative kind of gameplay experience that I felt at the time that they were being released was ahead of everything else. Like, especially that wait between 2 and 3, that was the most anticipation I've felt for a game, maybe even ever. Just because 2 was so far ahead of everything else graphically with the Mecha Dragon, the music, obviously, my favorite 8-bit soundtrack, personally. And then 3 comes out and it delivers in every way. Again, it's just better than everything else that was out there. And I mean, better is obviously subjective, right? But like in kind of the core ways that we judge a game, graphics, music, gameplay, it was virtually a 10 out of 10 in all those regards. So I don't know, that's what I think about it. It's just like this perfect fusion of all these elements, and man, it was just so much fun. So yeah, and quick ones. Brandon, your favorite and least favorite Robot Master?
Oh my gosh. I didn't anticipate this question. Favorite would be the Metal Man, just because of the power-up and how well you could use that from Mega Man 2. Yep. Least favorite would also be a Mega Man 2 one, just because my brother and I made fun of it so much through the game, and the irony of it. The bubble shot. What was the actual... Bubble Man. Yeah, we made fun of Bubble Man
I think it was
relentlessly. We were like, what the hell could a bubble possibly do to any of these? And then the irony at the... And it was like when we got to Wily at the end, we were so resistant to even thinking to use Bubble. We're like, well, let's try Heat again, maybe? But yeah, so probably both from Mega Man 2, just off the top of my head here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Arnie, how about you?
Favorite, design wise, I think Airman. I like the look of him.
Yeah.
But I'm a sucker for all the like really weird ones, like Skull Man and like Napalm Man, like all the like sort of out there ones. Like Pharaoh Man is really cool too. Nightman. Least favorite. Oh my god, it probably is Woodman. He looks so like stumpy and unimpressive as a Robot Master.
Yeah.
He has a headband.
Yeah.
Ozzy?
Favorite Snake Man, least favorite Charge Man.
Okay. I agree with Brandon. Metal Man is my favorite. Everything about him, his weapon, his pose that he does right before the stage starts. The actual fight with him is super fun. And least favorite happened last week. Ringman from Mega Man 4. That guy, I could never figure out the pattern. And by the end of the game, I had to use 2 E-tanks just to beat him in the boss rush. He drove me nuts, man. I hate that guy. I hate you, Ringman.
If you're listening...
All right, guys, and yeah, that wraps up the Mega Man 1 to 6 retrospective. Again, thanks, Brandon, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun, guys.
Awesome, and thanks to all of you for listening. Really appreciate it. Again, I know I mentioned it at the top of the show, but if you like what you're hearing, please leave us a review and a rating on iTunes. It'd be really awesome. And Brandon, we already mentioned we can find you at Super Sparkster on Instagram. Ozzy, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Shadow the Collector with periods in between.
Arnie?
Yep. You can find me at Welcome to the Game. It's the word welcome, number 2, the game.
And you can find me on Instagram as well, Paul's_game room. And all of us you can find at Region Free Gamers on Instagram. We're on Twitter too, but we haven't really used it very much yet. But Instagram,
we're on YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, and we're on YouTube as well. Of course, all of our episodes go up there. Thanks for reminding me. And but yeah, Instagram at Region Free Gamers. We do a lot of our chatting with folks there. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of people getting in touch, and it's exciting. So again, thanks everyone for listening. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Bye.